Uh, oh, this paper was super interesting.
Hey Tori, one thing it might help is if you could zoom in on the web pages a bit more, just to make the font a little bit bigger.
I can zoom in.
Yeah.
Let's go on a zoomy adventure. Check that shit out, guys. We're zoomed. So this paper is about cannibalism. Basically, it's like... I just hear giggles next to me. So when people talk about cannibalism historically, they often talk about how it probably happened because of people needed nutrition, and so they ate other people. But there hasn't been any evidence for that. So this study was looking at the caloric value of human meat as compared to other kinds of meat, and determined that humans are actually far less nutritious than pretty much any other animal, which is interesting in and of itself, and I kind of wonder why that is. Why humans would have lower calories. I mean, that would imply that we're like a leaner meat.
We're very muscly because we're very active and we move around a lot. Some of us.
Did they use?
We don't get very good fat marbling.
Yeah, like we're not like Kobe beef getting massaged all the time.
Kobe human.
Kobe human. What kind of meat would human?
Pork.
I know it tastes like pork.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know from experience, but that's a thing that I've heard a lot, is that it tastes like pork. Like human meat is actually pretty good. Yeah, so they were trying to decide if human cannibalism was nutritional or ritual. And they definitely came to the conclusion that there was something cultural or...
Why not both?
Let's see. A 50-kilogram male, which... Hey, can you freedom unit that for me?
What?
50 would be times 2.2.
Wait, what are you asking?
50 kilograms to pounds. 50 times 2.2 is 110. 110 pound male. Keep in mind, these were older people. Not older people as in they were elderly. Like, we're not eating our elderly. Yes.
We have a very good suggestion from one of our viewers.
Yes.
That if you want to win an Ig Nobel Award, you would automatically get it if you did an auto-cannibalism study.
Ooh. An auto-cannibalism study. Okay, like what could we... If we were going to do a scientific auto-cannibalism study, what would our hypothesis be? Like, what would we be trying to study?
How long you can be auto-cannibalistic and continue to live?
I mean, there have...
Because, there's a net loss in mass.
Yeah. So a 50-kilogram male yields approximately 30 kilograms of edible muscle mass, which in turn would yield about 18,000 calories of protein, 4.5 kilograms of protein. Now, I'm sure there's been some auto-cannibalism.
I'm gonna get some people to share other ideas for Ig Nobel worthy papers.
Yeah, please do. Auto-cannibalism illegal. Auto-cannibalism legal. People. Oh my god. So I'm going to Wikipedia here. And please note... Oh, it isn't. So for some, for the thumbnail, it's a TV trope picture of the Garbage Pail Kids, cooking himself. Garbage Pail Kids were a toy, an 80s toy. So I love that. Are they famous? Oh, wait. So I'm trying to see if there's like famous people who ate themselves. And this brings up I've always heard her name as Elizabeth Bathory, but apparently that's the way to spell it in Hungarian is I don't even want to butcher that. So this bitch be crazy. And she was a countess, I think. She was a noblewoman in the 1500s in Hungary. So keep in mind, like, this kind of Eastern Europe, Hungary, Romania area, like, we've got some serious Dracula-ness coming out of that area, right? Like, that's where Vlad the Impaler is. That's the whole, like, Boris, what's his face? I want to say Boris Yeltsin, but that's a Russian man and not the actor. Karloff. Boris Karloff. Oh, super proud of myself. My dad would be really proud of me for knowing that. In the early Dracula movies, doing this kind of Romanian accent, Transylvanian. And some people think that some of the Dracula stories might actually derive from Elizabeth Bathory. So this bitch, crazy. She is a noblewoman in Hungary in the 1500s, and she decides that she wants to be young forever. And so the way that she decides to do this, obviously, like, clearly, if you wanted to stay young forever, you would also bathe in the blood of young girls. So she brings in all of these girls as her servants, and she's kills them and fills bathtubs with their blood. Severe beatings, burning or mutilation of hands, biting the flesh off of their faces, arms, and other body parts, freezing or starving to death. They were covered in honey and live ants. They suspect that she ate them. And she would literally, like, bathe in the blood of these preteen girls in order to try to stay young. And so she was called the Blood Countess. I would like to say that since this is in fact a science channel, there is no evidence that bathing in the blood of preteen girls will keep you young. Where I was going with this is apparently she forced some of her servants to eat their own flesh. So forced self-cannibalism as a form of torture or a war crime. In Haiti in 1991, Sudanese young people in the 90s were forced to eat their own ears. I don't like this. I'm sad now.
Ears are just cartilage. Like, that can't be good.
Yeah, it would be ears would be super chewy. But, like, sharks are mostly cartilage, and shark fin soup is super popular.
Yeah, but it's actually not good, from what I hear. Also, I sent you very, very relevant links.
Oh, boy.
One of which might have been a story that you told me about and really creeped me out.
Oh, I love when you said... Oh, is it the one about the guy who met up with another guy and ate his penis and was really disappointed?
Yeah.
Oh,
But
yes.
even better is I didn't realize that there was a song written about it.
There's a song written about the penis-eating guy? I say penis-eating guy. Okay, we are going to take a quick detour. I know I said this is a science channel, but fuck it.
Cannibalism can be scientific.
Yeah, like, I'm a millennial white woman. Like, fuck it. I like true crime. Drinking wine. Talking about true crime. While wearing, I'm not even joking, my slippers that, like, are wine-themed. So that's how much of a millennial-ass white woman I am. And now we're going to be talking about cannibalism. So, the story that you are referencing, I assume, is...
I sent you links.
I know, I'm trying to get it up. I mean, hell.
Yeah, you are.
Woo!
I don't know
I'm not usually the one of us that...
I don't know who our viewer is, but they're very involved and very interested.
I'm here for it. I am here for it. Okay, so, the problem is that You guys don't need to know my struggles with my email client through which he is sending me. But they're real and they're deep. Stop it. Okay, so assuming this is the story that Jesse just sent me, I am a white-ass millennial woman. I love true crime and I love podcasts. And so I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. Oh my God, shocking. And one that came out relatively recently, and the last, this is the story. Okay. That came out in the last couple months is called Monstro. And this is where I first heard this story of cannibalism in a way that is really like, okay, we'll just go through it. So basically it was these two men in Germany who were really interesting because one of them desperately like had this erotic fantasy. We talked about fetishes last week. I don't know how this fits in with that, but had this erotic fantasy of being eaten. And this was just this thing that he would think about every time he like tried to jerk off, and he was really into this idea of being eaten. And he was able to connect through a message board with a guy who, swear to God, on the message board, the Cannibal Cafe, which is, I will share my screen with you guys so you can see what I'm reading and read along with me. The Cannibal Cafe, looking for well-built 18 to 30-year-old to be slaughtered and then consumed. And so the guy that answers, he takes it, they like talk about it, they set it up, he takes the train out to meet up with this guy, and they totally have this idea that they are going to fuck, and then the one guy is going to eat the other. So they go into their special little room in the guy's house, and they turn on a video camera. And so all of this is recorded. And he starts by like, I think he bit off the penis?
He tried to.
Okay, he tried to bite off the penis, but he couldn't get it all the way off. Which, that's an important lesson for us, is that it is very...
It was too tough and chewy.
No, that's a different part of the story. So he was trying to bite off the penis. And it didn't work, which should hopefully be very reassuring to any of you who watched, like, the Blowjob Girl video in, like, 2006 of, like...
The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
Yeah, with the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, you can't actually, apparently, bite off a penis that easily. So the dude takes 20 sleeping pills, drinks a whole bottle of cough syrup, is totally out of it, insists that the other guy tries to bite his penis off. It doesn't work, so they just cut it off with a knife. The dude who just had his penis cut off tries to eat it, but raw penis is apparently not palatable at all. So the cannibal guy takes it downstairs, fries it with salt, pepper, wine, and garlic in like the guy's fat, but he burns it. And so this burnt penis, he's like, well, fuck, I've like had this dream about eating this guy and like the sexual thing we're supposed to do together, and now I've burnt the dick. So he just ends up feeding the dick to the dog. And then he puts the now penisless guy in the bathtub. I love this fact, before going to read a Star Trek book. the cannibal guy ends up killing him, hangs his body on a meat hook, and then cuts up the meat and stores it in a freezer and just continues to eat it for the next 10 months. Like the same way my ex, who was really into hunting, would just order a whole cow, and there was a whole like cow cut up into different like cuts of meat in his freezer. Like that's the exact same thing, except with a person. And he ate 44 pounds of the meat. And he gets caught when he tries to do it again. Like once he runs out of meat, he tries to do it again. He gets caught. There was not actually a law against this at the time. So Germany like passes a law, and then he's convicted of manslaughter. He became a vegetarian in prison because of course. Oh, sorry. I told the story wrong. So he gets convicted of manslaughter. Then after that, Germany passes a law, retries him and convicts him of murder and sentences him to life in prison. So I told Jesse this story a couple months ago, and he was just like literally sitting next to me on the couch, just like, I can't listen to it. I can't listen to this penis eating story. But there we go. There's some self-cannibalization because the one guy wanted to eat it.
And Rammstein wrote a song about it.
And Rammstein wrote a song about it, which should surprise literally no one.
It's a good song.
Remix of the song were done by the Pet Shop Boys. All right. It was nominated for Best Metal Performance at the Grammy Awards, but lost to Slipknot. Alrighty then.
It have to suck to lose to Slipknot at anything.
God damn it, I lost to Slipknot. What's worse, losing to Slipknot or losing to Switchfoot?
Slipknot.
Okay. Right, so there's our...
If you lose to Switchfoot, you can just blame God.
So there is actually a word in science for, like, animals that consume themselves, or it's like autophagy. Self-devouring. Like when a cell, it's when a cell basically digests and reuses parts that it's no longer using. Which is basically self-cannibalism. But it sounds much better when cells are autophagying than when people are eating their own dicks. Which I also love because you can legitimately, with this story, tell someone to eat their own dick. Which works really well for me because I usually just tell people to, like, eat my metaphorical dick since I don't have one. But now we know. Anyway, back to our study where body parts that have been eaten during episodes of cannibalism historically include lungs, liver, brain, heart, nervous tissue, bone marrow, genitalia, and skin. Although we'll come back to the Ig Nobel Awards because as long as we're talking about cannibalism, I want to talk about Kuru. And did my little bannery thing change?
Yes.
Oh, bitchin'. I can do that live. Okay. So as long as we're talking about cannibalism, I want to talk about Kuru. Kuru is a prion disease, which are basically the most horrifying. Well, let's back up. So in like the 50s, people were noticing in this tribe in Papua New Guinea, they were noticing these weird symptoms that were like people would like be really shaky, they would lose coordination, what to me is the most terrifying part is they would just have bursts of uncontrollable laughter. Like, just bursts of laughter. They would call, like, so they called it the laughing disease, which is horrifying. And so this was this remote tribe in Papua New Guinea. And people knew about it, but it wasn't super, like, people didn't super care, because it was this, like, little tribe in Papua New Guinea. Which one of these is the guy that I want to... Nope, that's not it. Yeah, I think it's this guy. So this one virologist decides he's like a super adventurer. Yeah, this is the one. So he's a super adventurer, and he decides that he is going to go to Papua New Guinea and figure out what's going on with this disease that he is noticing is primarily in women and children. And it's killing a hefty number of the 4 people in Papua New Guinea, and has been for about, I think it's like 100 years. Let me see when it first. Wikipedia is not helpful to me at this moment and saying when they first observed it. But I think it was about like 50 years maybe that they had been observing this disease. So this guy, Gadjasek, who works at Walter Reed Army Hospital, goes down to Papua New Guinea and is studying this, and he puts together that when people in these villages would die, they had all these rituals, and one of them involved the women and children practicing cannibalism, funerary cannibalism. And so they would eat the bodies, and particularly like the brains of people who had recently died. And they continued to do this even with people who had died of disease. And so they're basically just passing it on by people having infected brains, and then they eat those brains, and then it gets passed on. And it has Kuru has a very variable incubation period of like up to a couple years. It's kind of insane. So what Kuru is it's what's called a prion disease. And so prions are basically like viruses for viruses. And prions are hella scary because they just don't give a shit. And like there's nothing you can do about prion diseases. So other prion diseases are Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is typically genetic and you're born with it, and kids with Creutzfeldt-Jakob die very, 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 very young. Or in sheep, there's one that's the name that stuck is called Scrapie, and it was called like because they would like scrape their heads. It was like one of the ticks. So it's this like horrifying disease that was caused by this like essentially just a misfolded protein that then kind of just took over the system. And here's a picture of this is the cerebellum, which is this part in the back bottom of the brain that controls movement. And it's like eaten away by Kuru, essentially. So that's unpleasant. But what brings Kuru this fucking horrible disease, which, by the way, once they made the connection and stopped funerary cannibalism, the villages in Papua New Guinea were cleared of Kuru. So hooray! But and the guy Gajusek won a Nobel Prize for his work on it in 1976, and that's all very exciting. And yet, what brings Kuru to not safe for work science? Gajusek, our primary researcher, who was one of the main people who really figured out and like really put the time and effort in to figure out what was going on. And it was like you doing animal studies, saw that the brains were similar to sheep. Like he figured out not only how it was being transmitted, but what it was similar to, and was able to figure things out. That way was huge in the discovery and understanding this disorder. But as I scroll down here, you'll see what the fuck is going on. So he would go down there, and he had helpers, children, young boys who would assist him in his work. And it was very much kind of not a secret that they were not just helping him with his work. And these were like preteen boys, up to like 15-ish. And so while he was in these 4 villages in Papua New Guinea, he had his young boy assistants that would live with him and help him with his work. And brought back 56 children from Papua New Guinea back to the United States when he came back to the U.S. One of them accused him of only one of them accused him of molesting him, but there were a lot more that like he would talk about, there were other boys that were like, yeah, he totally had sex with me, but it didn't bother them at all. So 56 boys, mostly boys, a few girls, that he brings back to the U.S. He sends them to high school. He sends them to college. He has sex with them. And he writes it in his diary. Like, this fucking Nobel Prize winning scientist you'd think would be smart literally writes about raping children in his diary. So he is sentenced to, he was convicted. He did serve time in jail. At his trial, 7 men testified about him having sex with them when they were boys. 4 of them said the sex was untroubling. 3 of them said the sex was shaming, abusive, and a violation. Gajusek openly admitted to molesting boys, like, to his, like, people in his social circle, and that he approves of incest. And so this guy who won the Nobel Prize and did really, really amazing work, but at the same time was just like, and there is some suspicion that that's kind of why he went to Papua New Guinea in the first place, is because he was getting some heat for things that he had communicated to his friends that he was interested in. I don't know about partaking in, but there's just this like horrifying backstory to this guy who won the Nobel Prize about how he like went to these villages who had very little contact with kind of like Western civilization, and ended up just having his way with probably dozens of children. So that's my another depressing little version thing there as we're talking about cannibalism. Kuru.